Well, hi there. So in this video, we're going to do some extra practice related to factor markets. So let's get started. Okay, so the first part says the graph shows a labor market and a typical individual firm hiring in this market. So it's kind of nice. They've given us the graph. We don't have to draw all of this WFC, MRP stuff. They probably should have connected all of that, but we're going to let that go. If WM, this wage in the market, equals WF, from what type of labor market does the firm has to be hiring? Well, it's a perfectly competitive one. It's a perfect competitive. Probably perfectly would be better. Competitive, not a monopsony. And that's kind of the easy way to tell, right? If you have two, then you know you're in a perfectly competitive market. If it's not that, if there's only one and you have that separated supply MFC curve that's coming up off of it, you know you're in a monopsonistic market. Assume the productivity of workers increases as a result of improvements in technology. What will happen in these following? Market demand for labor. Well, we know that's going to increase, and it doesn't ask to explain, but I'm going to go ahead and put an explanation here because MRP equals price times marginal product, and the marginal product increases. And that's really the improvement in productivity, right? That's what's saying is it's going to affect the marginal product. And so there's only two ways that the demand for labor can change, right? It could go up or down. There's only two things that can change it, is better to say. And that would be the price of the product, the output good that's being produced using these inputs, or the actual productivity of the inputs themselves. The wage rate the firm will pay will also increase. And that's because there's higher demand in the market. So increase WM and increase WF because firm is a wage taker. And I'm probably over explaining here to say this in the video, but I think it's valuable to understand that the wage rate the firm is going to pay is going to rise because you have a higher demand, and that's going to cause the equilibrium wage to increase. And this firm will have to pay a higher marginal factor cost. But we also know that at the same time, the MRP is shifting to the right as well. So you're going to have this larger quantity of workers being hired in this market, but you're also going to have a higher wage. Suppose the firm only produces good X and produces price of Y, a substitute decreases. So what will happen? The optimal quantity of the firm will hire. So if we say, if the price of Y decreases, we can say, therefore, the demand for X will decrease. And that's because we know that they are substitutes for each other. And because the demand for X increases, we can say the price of X will fall. And therefore, we know that the MRP of workers will decrease. And therefore, the quantity of labor hired will decrease. And what I've written out here is the answer, decrease, but this is the explanation for why. And kind of just to unpack it a little bit, if the price for Y goes down, then we know that the demand for this good X, will decrease because they're substitutes and people will buy this other good Y instead. And when demand for good X decreases, we know that the price of good X decreases because that's the market force. And we know that the marginal revenue product, which is just the marginal product times the price, is going to fall because the price is going down, right? That's the price of good X right there. The marginal product is going to stay the same, the productivity of the workers or what have you. But the MRP decreasing is going to decrease the demand for labor, which decreases the quantity of labor hired. And that's the kind of full answer that they're looking for Part C. Part D, if the labor market were a monopsony, would the monopsonist hire more, fewer, or the same number of workers as QM? They would hire fewer. And that's because we know that their MFC is kind of a higher value compared to their supply curve. And again, if that's not clear, I would encourage you to go back and rewatch that monopsony video. The table at right shows a short run production function. So it's just giving us inputs, right? That's inputs and output. That's all a production function is. We learned that in Unit 3. Beginning at which worker do diminishing marginal returns set in. So I'm going to have MP off to the side. We have 150, 100. Sorry, that's not 150. That's 120. I can't quite read my own stuff here. Let me just cross that out. 120. That helps. 130. My eyes are getting old. I can't see. 130. 120. There it is. So the first worker where marginal product decreases is the third. So it's beginning with the third because the MP of the third is 120, and that's less than the MP of the fourth, I'm going backward. The MP of the second, which is 130, and that's the highest MP. All right, so here we kind of just identified that this is the first worker where the marginal product is less than the previous. Assume the product is sold in perfect competitive market at a price of 3. Calculate the MRP of the second worker. So MRP equals the price times the marginal product. We're given a price of $3 times the marginal product of the second worker, 130, and so that's equal to $390. And part C, workers are hired in a perfectly competitive wage 140, market price remains 3. How many workers will they hire? So if their wage is 140, that's their MFC of 140. And so their MRPs, I'm going to come all the way down to this kind of bottom part here because the price of the product is $3 equals the price. And so this one, the marginal product is 40. And that MRP is 120, so I'm not going to hire that fifth worker. This one, the marginal product is 50, and so that's 150. I will hire this worker. So Q4, because the MRP is, what did we say, 150, and that's greater than or equal to the MFC of 140, and not I was going to say Q7. I don't know why. Not Q5, because MRP of Q5 is 120. That's less than the MFC of 140. So again, these are not terribly challenging types of questions to answer. It's just remembering how to figure out what the two things I'm looking to compare are. I'm looking to compare the value of the worker, that's to say the demand that this company has for this worker, and the factor cost. Let's take a look at these multiple choice questions on factor markets. Question number 1, I'm going to zoom in just a shade because, as I said earlier, my eyes is getting too old for this. A firm's demand curve for labor is equal to its marginal revenue product. So I'm looking for that MRP curve. There it is, D. Which of the following is most likely to shift the demand for aircraft mechanics to the right? So that would be an increase in demand. It's either going to be the price is going up or the marginal product is going up. So an increase in the demand for air travel, that would lead to the value of their product rising. So I think it's going to be that one. I'm going to test the rest. An increase in license fees, no, that makes it more expensive. Decrease in, no. These would just change the supply, right? This is like B and C would affect how much people are willing and able to actually supply their labor. Decrease in the demand for air travel, that's the opposite of A, so it's going to be A. Decrease in marginal productivity, again, we're looking for more product, so A. 3, a perfectly competitive profit maximizing firm will continue to hire additional units as long as the MRP is bigger than the MFC, right? So I'm going to look for that answer. The marginal revenue product, the value of what they're producing, is greater than how much it costs to hire them. So marginal product, no, it's not that one. Marginal cost of them, no, that's just MC. Value of the marginal product of the input exceeds the price of the input. That is going to be it. That's going to be our answer because we're comparing MRP is greater than MFC. That's what it's saying. MRP is bigger than MFC. Revenue associated with the employment of the last unit of the input is maximized. No, it's not just the maximum amount that we can make. We're actually going to think on the margins. Price of the product is greater than cost of input. No, that has nothing to do with it. All right. 4, a perfectly competitive product producer with steel rods and steel beams employs 100 workers. If steel rods and beams sell for the same price, which of the following should produce to use them efficiently? I should allocate them so the average cost of producing beams equals the average cost of producing rods. That would make sense because I'm looking for the cost minimizing combination. Allocate workers such that the marginal product of labor is the same in both rod production and beam production. That would make sense as well. And then let's take a look at the third one, because this one is also saying MP over W is equal to MP over the rent rate, but it's kind of comparing like which product should I produce. So it's really saying like the marginal product of this steel rods, it's not the rent anymore, it's the wage, and the rods and the beams. So it's kind of taking a different form of that problem. Allocate afterworks to rod. No, I'm not going to do that because that doesn't necessarily think on the margins of their productivity. So it's going to be, let's see, average cost of producing beams. No, the first one is not correct here. Allocating workers such that the marginal product of labor is the same will actually cause these values to equilibrate. So really, the reason why we would say that 2 only is the correct answer here is because it's going to maintain these 2 statements being true, that the marginal product of rods divided by the wage, because you're paying the workers the same. I think it actually says that, right? They have identical skills, and so they're all the same workers. and the steel rods and the steel beams sell for the same price. So it's really not about like the MRPs of these. It's saying that the productivity of the beams has to match the productivity of the rods, and that actually would allow us to essentially maximize the amount of output that we can produce. 5, assume a firm uses only 2 inputs, capital and labor, and let the MPK, blah, 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 the least cost combination of inputs. So in other words, it's just saying like, what is the rule? And the rule is that these things have to be equal, right? It's literally just restating that thing that we just read. And that is true for price of labor equal to price. So it's this one, that one, A. It's a little bit hard to understand, but when they say PL, they're saying the wage. And I think they even say that the price of labor and the price of capital, right? The price of capital equals the rental rate. And so it's just telling you that inside this problem. So I'm going to zoom this back out just a shade here. Whoop, there we go. Okay. 6, the wage rate is 10. The last worker hired by the firm increased output by 100. The computer's rent for 100. The last computer rented by 1,000. So we would say that 100 over 10, and this is from the labor. And then we have 2,000 over 100. That's from the capital. Which one of these is bigger? Well, we've got 10 and then we've got 20. 20 is bigger than 10. So we should hire more machines and fewer laborers. So hire more workers? No, that's not right. Hire more workers? No. Lay off workers and rent more computers because computers produce more output per dollar of spending. That's true. Lay off workers went because computers produce more output? No. Compute the same number? No. C is the right answer. This is saying C. Let's take a look then at number 7, a profit maximizing firm that sells its output in a perfectly competitive market, hires 2 additional workers, calculating the contribution to total revenue. The last worker hired just equals the extra cost of hiring a worker. 6 months later, the firm then finds that they shouldn't have hired that worker. So they should, what may have occurred to explain that, right? Like it initially was golden and then it wasn't golden. So why? And it would be because the MRP decreased or the MFC increased. One of those two things occurred. So the firm laid off some workers. That we're going to pause on that one and think about it for a second. The market supply for the firm's product decreased. No, that wouldn't do it. C, the market demand for the product decreased. That would do it because this would mean that the price decreased, and that means that the MRP decreased. So C is the right answer here. The reason why A is not right is just because they lay off some workers doesn't necessarily change the factor cost or the MRP. Technological advance increase the productivity. That would make the MRP rise, and that would actually make us to hire more workers. E, the firm negotiated contracts that lowered workers' wages. No, that would cause them to hire workers as well. So C is the only one where it would cause them to want to not hire that worker that they used to actually hire. Number 8, given the table, how many workers would be employed if the wage rate were 20 and sandwiches sold for 50 cents? So this is really tiny, but it says sandwiches produced per day. And so this is the marginal product already. So I don't actually need to calculate that. MRP is therefore half of what these values are. So it's 125, 115, 100. Let's see. I would hire all of them. I would hire all these workers. And that's because the wage rate's $20 a day, which I don't know how you're going to find a sandwich maker making $20 a day. But here, the number of sandwiches produced per day is 200. The sandwiches are 50 cents, so they're producing an MRP of 100, and they're only $20. So I'm going to hire all 7 of these. I'm going to keep hiring beyond that even. Number 9, the graph above shows the monopsony labor market in the absence of any regulations, number of workers hired, and the wage rate. So they're going to hire where MFC equals MRP, and that corresponds to quantity 20 labor, and they pay on that supply curve. So they're going to pay a wage rate of 20. So 20 workers at a $20 wage, B. And then last but not least, in a perfectly competitive labor market, all the following are true except the imposition of an effective minimum wage will result in unemployment. That is true. We've seen that in the lecture. B, an increase in the marginal product will increase the demand for nurses and increase wages. That is also true. C, an increase in the supply of nurses will create unemployment and leave wages unchanged. That's not true. An increase in the supply would decrease the wages, but it wouldn't necessarily create unemployment. It just decreases the wages. So C is going to be our right answer. D, an increase in the demand for healthcare increases the demand for nurses. That is true because it's just the MRP. rising, right? And then revoking work permits will increase wages. That would be decrease in supply, so that would also be true. So this one is definitely C. So hopefully this helped you with the extra practice related to factor markets. I'll see you next time.